This is Steve Reed from the University of Southern California. Today I'm going to show you how to create what's called a monitor var, which can be used to record values or statistics from the various parts of your network and save them into a data table. Once I've done that, I'll then show you how to create some simple graphs from some of the variables in your data table. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use this very simple example program I've created that classifies 5 different animals on the basis of different sets of features. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a monitor var that's going to record some of the variables from the output layer, or what's called species here. First thing we need to do is to make sure we click the red arrow over here. Then what we do is we click on the species layer, and then in the center panel you'll now see that you get a dialog box, and at the bottom it says monitor var. What you do is you click on the monitor var. You'll then get a dialog box, and there are 2 things you need to worry about here. One is it says netmon, and basically what that is doing is it's where you define where you're going to copy from, which in this case is you're going to do a copy from the network to data, which would be the trial output data. And the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to define the level at which you're going to record the data. So you'll notice here you have a trial netmon, and you have an epoch netmon. And the trial netmon records the values at the level of each trial. The epoch netmon reports the values averaged over an epoch. Okay, in this case we want to do a trial netmon. We say OK. And then it says variable, and if we know the variable we want to record, we can just type it in. So for example, if we wanted to record the activation in the minus phase, we would type in act_m. But suppose we don't know the variable we want to record. Well, there's a way to find out what variables are available, and what we do is we just leave the variable blank and click OK. And now we get a dialog box in the center. It's called a netmon item. It's got a number of records in it, or fields in it, and basically what we need to pay attention to is here where it says object type, object, and then lookup var. So first what we need to do is we need to specify the object type we want to record, and in this particular case we actually would like to record at the level of individual units in the output layer. So instead of recording instead of having an object type called Leabra layer, we actually want to get something different. So we click on that, we get this dialog box which gives us all sorts of different things we can record from. And what we want to do is we want to record Leabra unit at that level. We click on Leabra unit, say OK. Now it basically says OK, we're going to look at the Leabra unit level on the species layer. We now look up the available variables. You'll now notice we have a number of different variables such as activation, activation average. Down here we have activation for the minus phase, activation for the plus phase, and a whole host of other variables we could potentially record. In this particular case, I want to record act sub m, or activation in the minus phase. So I'll double click on that, and we now have defined part of what we need for the monitor var. The one other thing to pay attention to here is you'll notice that it automatically creates a variable name. It takes act_m and then appends that onto species, which is the name of the layer. But you'll notice it truncates part of the species name. What Leabra's doing is it's generating a name automatically. If you go down to name style, you'll notice it says auto name, and basically what happens here is if you have auto name, Leabra will automatically generate a name for you. If you want to basically have the freedom to create your own name, you can click on the menu here, and you also get an option for my name. But right now we're going to leave at auto name. Okay, so now at this point we've defined the monitor var. You'll notice, by the way, that over here in the left panel under Leabra trial, we now have it's opened up this window, or not window, but it's opened up a list. It now basically says, well, here's the trial monitor from network. And it's listed all the variables that the trial netmon is actually recording to the trial output data table. And you'll notice it's now added the variable species actm. Okay, so what we do now is we train the network. Go over here, hit to train, and we do init, and then we run, and we run the network until it's learned. In this case, maybe it's not going to learn, so I think what I'm going to do is stop it. Okay, if I stop it, I now go over to the output data table, and if I click on trial output data table, if I go over, you'll notice that I now have this variable over here called species actm, and it's actually in the form of a matrix. And what this is this is the variables for species actm and in the form of a matrix. And basically what it's telling me is here are the variables that it's recorded from each of the items in the unit. Okay, each of the items in the layer rather. Okay, so now I have this. I've now recorded actm in the output data table, and now what I might want to do is I might want to create a graph so that you can actually look at what's in the data table. And I'm going to basically talk about two different graphs you can create. Okay, one, you can take the species data that you have now defined, and you could say, okay, I'd like to create a graph of what that looks like. And what I could do is I go down here where it says View, and I choose New Grid View, and then I could put it in the same window as my network, which is what network sub 1 T3 panel would do, or I could put it in a new frame. Let's put it in a new frame. Click on that. Now what you'll notice is over here I now have this grid view that has things in it such as, let's click on that, batch, epoch, trial, trial name, group name. And if I scroll over, I get this nice little grid view that shows me graphically how strongly activated different nodes are. And now, so if I go back and actually rerun the network, and initialize it, and run it again, you'll notice it clears this display. And then run it, what it will do is while it's running it, it'll actually show me in that grid view the activations in the species actm that's being recorded. Okay, so that's what you do with if you want to create a grid view. And there's not an awful lot you can do in a grid view in terms of modifying how it looks. Although one thing you can do, you may notice that there are an awful lot of columns in here that you don't really care about. You really care about phase number. And what you can do is you can either right-click, there we go. You can either right-click or control-click, and then down here you get a menu and it says Hide. And you can now hide some of these menus. So let's do that again just to make sure you know. Grid column view, go down, say hide. Okay, so that's going to, now that'll hide columns that you don't care about. Now, what do you do if you want to create sort of a line graph or something like that from your data? Well, let's give you an example here. Let's look at the, instead of the trial output data, let's look at the epoch output data. And let's say what we'd like is to see the average sum square errors, and we'd like to see maybe how the average sum square error will change with training, or how the error, the number of errors or the number of errors made in predicting an outcome will change over training. So what we can do is we're now in this the epoch output data, and again at the bottom you have a little menu item that says View, and you go down and click that, and instead of Grid View you now say Graph View. And again, it will ask you, do you want it in a new frame, or do you want to put it in a frame with some of the other, either the network or with the grid view. And again, we're going to put it in a new frame just because it's going to be easier to see and work with. So let's do that. Okay, now you now see this line graph. This is sort of the default that Emergent will create. And actually what the default is, it's created a line graph that graphs the number of epochs versus the average sum square error of the epoch. And you'll also notice actually that this is a 3D chart, so it has a z dimension. But if you're not doing batches, you might as well just turn it off. So you can just turn it off by doing that. Now, this graph is showing you the average sum square error over the epochs, but maybe you'd also like to know the counts, the number of errors, how frequently does it mispredict an outcome. And what you could do here is over here, you'll notice it says X, Z, Y, and then Y is Y1 through like Y9. What this means is you could actually potentially graph I think 8 or 9 different variables here, but let's say we're going to do count error. So we go and we do this, and now we see that we have 2 lines here. One is for the average sum square error, and one is for the number of errors or predictions that are made. Now you'll notice one thing about the lines in the graph, that they vary in terms of their value. The colors of the lines vary in terms of their value. Now that's not particularly useful when you're trying to graph 2 different things. It's a little hard looking at this to tell which is average sum square error and which of them is the count of the number of errors of prediction. So what you can do with this is you can scroll down in this dialog box. You'll notice down here there's something that says color mode, and right now it says value color. What value color does is it displays the lines in colors that represent their intensity or value. And what's probably most useful is you set it to fixed color. You do that, and now you see that the number of errors is in red and the average sum square error is in black. So now you can distinguish between these. Okay, now if you go back up to this, there are some other things you can do when you play around with the graph that you can control from up here. So you can control, is it an XY, a bar, a raster graph? What's the style? Is it a line drawing just points? See, it just gives you points instead of the continuous line and points, things like that. In addition, there are, you can do things playing around with the axis. You can basically set up minimum and maximum. So right now it just sort of automatically chooses a minimum and maximum, but you could choose your own and fix it. And there's some other odds and ends that you might be able to do in playing around with the graph. Okay, so that's how you can create monitor vars and simple graphs that display the results of those monitor vars in Leabra.